I'm so thankful that my faculty in my department are very open with their faith. They share their stories very openly and are very strong in their faith, at the same time with being very strong in their field. And I think students see that as a model and really respond to it very well, that there's no compromise in being Christian, that there you can be Christian and be what you want to be with regard to your chosen career choice as well.
Dr. Joseph Pelletier is the Associate Professor of Psychology in the College of Education and Behavioral Sciences at HBU. He earned his advanced degrees at the University of Kent in Canterbury in the United Kingdom. His primary teaching interests are social psychology, developmental psychology, research methods, and statistics. He teaches at both the undergraduate and graduate levels. Wow, that's quite an impressive resume, CV you got.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So tell us, give us the little synopsis of your CV.
Okay. So I'm a first-generation college student. I was born and raised in just outside of Dallas. Neither one of my folks went to school, but it was something from childhood. I remember them saying, "You have to go. This is our dream. We don't dream about retirement. We don't dream about big houses. You have to go." And I have a younger sister. They said the same thing too. And when it came time to go, I didn't want to. I wanted to be a mechanic, actually, because I love cars.
Sure.
And my dad said, "You know what? We've invested everything in this, and if you don't go, we'll disown you," which was a big deal because I'm actually very close to my folks, and so I knew he was serious. Yeah. So sure enough, I went to A&M and had a wonderful experience there, and really kind of hit my stride. I feel like my faith grew a lot while I was there as well. I matured as a person and as a Christian. And I met my beautiful wife there as well. It was just a very positive experience, and God gave me the momentum to keep going. And so I applied for only one graduate school. It was a shot in the dark, and God opened the door for us. And my wife and I got married actually 2 weeks before we moved. So we got married and then flew, took everything we owned, and just set up a life out there. She's a woman of strong faith as well, and she knew that this was the right move for us as well. So we went out there. It was supposed to be a one-year stint to do a master's degree, and fell in love and just couldn't stop, really. I just saw that this was the path that God laid before me. So did 2 master's degrees while I was there, as well as a doctorate in social psych, and just credit so much of what I've gained in my career to that experience. It was something that I never saw as part of my plan until God laid it before me, and just feel so blessed to have been able to do so.
Now, how many years in the UK?
We were there for almost around 5 years, just short of 5 years. Yes, sir.
And I don't even hear the British accent or anything.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's actually mostly in the way, like the words that I'll use. So when I go get on an elevator, I'll say, "Oh, the lift,"
yeah.
Or we'll get in the queue,
or
things like
put
this.
The stuff in the boot.
In the boot, exactly. Yes, sir. Yeah. I think I had a little bit of an accent when we first came back, but not much. And it faded fast. So yeah.
Now, tell me why the focus on psychology development, this area of study.
So my initial interest came from how children learn to think about the world, the social world in particular. And there was a few formative experiences I had when I was in high school where I saw people being discriminatory, especially children, showing racism and sexism. And my question was, okay, did they learn that, or was it something that's built in there? Is it a cognitive process that we all just go through? So my research focused on that as well. Are children born with these mechanisms of prejudice, or do they have to learn it? And so my master's and doctorate thesis were all focused on that as well, and I really explored it for children between 5 and 10 years old. And the question ultimately was, are we born with prejudice? And thankfully, I was wrong. We aren't born with it. They actually have to learn it and have to be taught it. I think that speaks volumes for how we should address our children, the lessons we should teach them as they grow. My wife and I have 4 children now, and it's something I really impart with my kids, that you have to treat people with respect and love and dignity, regardless of how they might be different from you. Not that the differences aren't important, but to see those differences as secondary to who that person is.
So how old are your children?
7, 5, 4, and 1.
Wow.
Yes, sir. Yeah, so it's
you must have a super wife.
She is. She is an incredible person. She's a stay-at-home mom, and she also runs her own business. But she's just an incredible mother and wife as well. Yeah, they're good kids, but she takes darn good care of all of us.
Psychology and all the related courses in a university are particularly popular. About a third of the enrollees, atypically, in a university have some kind of psych, counseling, derivative.
Yes, sir.
What's the magnet there?
I think it's a subject. What drew me to it, and what draws so many people to it, I think, is the fact that it's so relatable. When you study physics, for example, there's a lot of physics that you'll never actually see tangibly. Same for chemistry. Unless you're studying it in the lab, you won't see it. But I think psych touches a part of all of us. For the same reason why I think people like to study religion as well. There's something about all of us that is reflected in psychology as it is reflected in religion, that we want to know more. It's more introspective. It builds our metacognition. And so I think there's something, even if you're more of a hard science person or you have another field that you're really interested in, I love that we have this as part of our core curriculum because I think it speaks volumes to who these students are and how they'll develop as adults.
Now, what are the courses in the core that relate to that?
At the moment, we only have general psych. So as a student that comes through HBU, general psych is a required course for everyone who comes through.
Undergraduate.
Undergraduate, yes, sir. I'd like to see that expanded to social psych as well, but that obviously there's a bias there as well. But I feel like we need these mechanisms in there because in the diverse world we're in, the university itself is so diverse. I'd love to see students get a better idea of how this diversity impacts our interactions and how we can address this diversity in a positive way. One of the reasons why I think social or cultural psych would be so valuable to our general population is the diversity, the intermixing of people in the world is so commonplace and expected in the world now. So I think people have to have a better idea of how to do it well, how to respect other cultures, and then how to address this in a workplace, personal, interpersonal sort of interaction.
You know, when Columbine happened nearly 20 years ago, I filmed with a young man who survived in the library by playing dead.
Yes, sir.
And, but you know, Columbine, as I thought, is forgotten because every week there's another Columbine.
Absolutely.
It's tragic, but
Yes.
I mean, we're accustomed to it.
It is, absolutely.
And I have to believe that the field that you've studied and these courses related are essential to help people understand how to navigate and live and how to have tranquility and not conflict. I mean, tell me about that.
So actually, it's interesting that you bring it up. My current field of study, my main focus of study is actually on mass violence. And what are the catalysts and how as a society in general do we cope with this? As you pointed out, it seems like something like this happens every week. Since 2010 to 2019, the FBI kept a record of all the mass shootings. And I believe the total was 256, and what they consider mass shootings, and the definition varies. But people have become numb to the situation. And something I try and emphasize in my classes in particular is we can't become numb because then they will continue to happen. We have to still feel these things and understand that that was someone's child, someone's father, someone's husband, wife. These are people and not just some sort of statistic. And that, I think we have to keep the personhood of these situations in our forefront of our minds deliberately, because otherwise it's easy to just shrug it off and be like, I can't worry about that. That's part of the fallen world. It is, but I think we can be part of the solution as well. And I think it starts with compassion.
It really does. Tell me about the developmental processes of a child 5 to 10 years of age. What did you learn?
Some of the things I think of them as sponges. So anything they come into contact with will leave its mark on them. And I think sometimes we discount how smart children are and how observant they are. So a lot of the things, even if it comes down to like cartoons, I grew up in an era where there's a lot of cartoons with a really kind of stereotyped behavior. I'm thinking Speedy Gonzales, for example, right? And at the time, no one thought of it, but of course it represents a very strong stereotype that can create stigma and prejudice. So I think we have to be more mindful of what we experience. I think even as adults, we believe that we can interact with something and it doesn't leave a mark on us. I'm thinking, and I hate to be this way, but like violent video games. A lot of these games are marketed towards adults. Children play them, but a lot of adults feel like, oh, I'm immune to that. It doesn't affect me. Lyrics and songs, violence we see in movies and TV, we tend to think that we're impervious to this, but in reality, in many ways, it desensitizes us and makes us more willing to just turn the other cheek when it comes to something like a mass shooting in real life. And I think that's very unfortunate. I think it starts with how we condition our children to accept or reject these sort of behaviors. And a lot of my research at the moment is looking at how we might counter this sort of social momentum towards accepting violent acts in general as just commonplace or part of today's culture.
I'd be interested, the other day I was at my son's house and my wife and I were talking about something and I noticed my 10-year-old granddaughter in the periphery was listening to every single word. We were talking about something, some decision we had to make or something. When you say sponges, and then you see the technology that are at the disposal of these kids' hands, because my granddaughter can do an iPhone better than I can.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
How does a parent do it?
I think the big thing is context, because you're never going to make them immune to it. Whether they're at school or on TV or on their devices, there's going to be influences that affect them that you don't want them to, basically. What I think is, from both a parenting point of view and then a scientific point of view, is we have to give them the tools to cope and understand what they're dealing with. I think for many parents that I speak to, they'd rather just turn their face and no, they don't see these things. They've never encountered this sort of media or whatever you have. And I think, no, we have to own the reality that they are exposed to these things, but we have to inform them how to address them appropriately, and especially from a Christian worldview. When my kids ask questions about the big world, I want to give them a very good Christian answer, as opposed to, ask your mother, or, we'll talk about it another time. I like to give them an answer if I can. And I think the answering part is so essential to making sure that they can contextualize what they've seen and not let them minimize the negative effect it could have on their mindset and their behavior.
What drew you to HBU?
God, to be honest with you. So I was actually at Cal Baptist University in Riverside, California,
Okay.
And loved it. And I just felt like that, as much as I loved that environment, there was a part of it that was still not home, and kind of in a way I couldn't articulate, to be very honest with you. I was looking, and HBU was something I was aware of growing up in Texas. I knew about the university, but I prayed for an opportunity that would feel more like home. And I mean, shortly after I started praying for it, this job opportunity came up. And so I immediately contacted the chair of the department and sent the email and sent the resume. But the more I learned about HBU, the more I liked what they had to say and what they represented. I feel like it suits me as a Christian, but suits me as an academic as well. I like that I feel very comfortable merging these two halves of me that in many ways had to be separate for a long time. The schools I went to were secular schools. My background has always been in a more of a naturalistic world. And here I can be a Christian and a scientist, and in fairly equal measure, and not feel like I have to compromise one for the other. And I continue now, having been almost 4 years here, I can say that perspective has just grown and been more nurtured, and really love it. Really love it here.
We hear constantly young people who come to HBU who just say, I came to Christ here, my life changed here.
Yes.
I mean, we hear that all the time.
Yes, sir.
And HBU has this wide gate of openness, and yet, there's no timidity whatsoever about who we are or what we believe in.
Yes, sir.
How in the psychology field, I've got to believe that there's a lot of variant teaching, viewpoint. How does that all happen?
It's kind of a tough one, actually, because as a field, it is notably secular to the extent of, in some cases, perceived as atheist altogether, compared to other fields of study. I think students, when they come here, they're so surprised to see that you can study psychology and not disregard your worldview, whether it be Christian or otherwise. I think I always tell my students, I feel like there's something very, very servant-like in studying psychology. My argument is human beings are the greatest of all of God's endeavors, and the human mind is the apex of what He's created. So to study that and devote your life to not only addressing that, but also helping people who might experience disorders or disabilities associated with, to me, that's a very Christ-like calling. And I try and emphasize that to our students, because I think the large world will also tell them that that's not the case, that this is a field where you have to check your faith at the door. And I'm so thankful that my faculty in my department are very open with their faith. They share their stories very openly and are very strong in their faith, at the same time with being very strong in their field. And I think students see that as a model and really respond to it very well, that there's no compromise in being Christian, that there you can be Christian and be what you want to be with regard to your chosen career choice as well.
Tell me about the department. What's going on over in the department?
So we're small in terms of faculty members, but I think extraordinarily strong. We continue to grow year on year in terms of recruitment for students at the graduate and both undergraduate level. We're developing new programs. We now offer a master's degree in Christian psychology, which is, there's not many programs like that out there. We are on the verge of offering a 5-year MAP program to where students can come in and do both a bachelor's in psychology and a master's of psychology in just a 5-year span, which is also something very innovative. There's not a lot of programs, even countrywide, that you can find those. We try and just be very adaptive to the needs of students. Our faculty, to me, because there are so few of us, but we do develop a lot of good contact. So we're very direct with our students. Our advisees, they come by. Our offices constantly have students in it, which is what we would want to have. But we also try and prepare students for that next step. We teach them this bachelor's degree is the beginning of a career, not the end of an education. So we give them the perspective that this will be the segue into something larger. And I think that really, particularly for our first-gen students, is something that maybe has never been told to them, that they come in maybe not feeling like they deserve or are, that their identity doesn't line up with being a student, and we encourage them to feel as it does, that they've been brought here for a reason, and then also encourage them to think of graduate studies as potentially their future. Once again, I've seen so many of them that I believe have never been told that. And I think they're pleased to see that someone has the faith in them and their ability to grow as an academic and as a professional.
Often people challenge the cost of an education and they ask, what's the job? How much am I going to get paid?
Yes,
okay?
yeah.
So help people who probably very innocently look at a psychology area and they say, How will that translate in my grandson or my granddaughter getting a job, and what kind of jobs could they get?
And those are good questions, especially with the cost of loans and paying for it. I understand that, and a lot of my students will ask that point blank. With an undergraduate degree in psychology, it's kind of what I would consider like a multi-tool, basically. In the field of psychology, it's fairly limited in terms of what you can do with a bachelor's degree in that. But what we're finding more and more is that employers across different industries really like people with that background, because we impart them with skills to problem solve, interactive skills as well. I think when students come in, if they want to work in our field, they have to expect that they'll need to go on for additional degrees. But as far as the undergrad degree, it spans a lot. We have a lot of students who go into HR, a lot of students who go from our degree into a business environment because of their ability to interact with people and see situations. And there's, of course, good income in that. If you want to go further, a master's degree, there's certain fields of psychology where a master's degree is really a terminal degree. You can start to do therapy, for example, or clinical work, counseling. These are all things that people go into. Job security is very high. Obviously, we're always going to need therapists. So, that's the world we live in. So there's good job security. The income level, even starting as a therapist, is well above median income for master's degree level in most cases. It's a good field. Obviously, going the full direct length to a doctorate, too, that'll increase as well. I think there's more of a turnaround than people think. The hard win is going to be steering first gens towards a soft science. In reality, it's always going to be a soft science compared to chemistry, biology, things like this. And a lot of first gens are more inclined towards a hard science. I think once we show them that the degree itself does pay off both developmentally and then also financially, you'll see more students shifting that direction as well. But I think there's a lack of information in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I like the way you make that clear. The whole mental health crisis in the country, I mean, obviously underscores that there's going to be more counselors. There's going to be a doctorate in this area. I would end up doing what?
It varies on the doctorate. So, for example, my doctorate in social psych is really more of a research field. So I have no ability to practice or treat or anything like that. So I'm a psychologist really in name only. If you do a degree, for example, in clinical, you could go on to be a therapist, a clinician at a clinic, at a hospital, things like that. It varies quite a bit. You could also go a PsyD route, for example, where you'll get kind of the best of both worlds, research and more practical application. So there's a lot. There's actually a lot more than I think we have kind of a Freudian perspective of, oh, well, then once you have a doctorate, everyone sits on your couch and they tell you why they hate their mother or whatever, And that is, of course, an essential part of what we do, but it goes well beyond that. IO psychology, for example, being an excellent intersection of business and psychology. And more, the business sector is seeing a need for on-hand trained psychologists to kind of triage employees and then also treat larger issues within the institution as well. So.
Well, there's nothing better than having a cohesive staff community or business community.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
I mean, a number of these tragedies are the hacked off employee that comes in with a gun to kill everybody.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned Columbine. We can think of the 90s era disgruntled postal workers, right?
Oh,
and that was that spate of that there. And to mitigate that, that's where these IO psychologists can come in and really make a difference in keeping the mental health of the corporation high and in a good range.
Joseph, if you would, forgive me for not addressing you as doctor. Dr. Joe, as the kids call you.
Yes, sir.
Just look in that camera there, and I want you to talk to parents and grandparents that are considering HBU for their son or grandson. Why should they send their grandson or son or daughter to Houston Baptist University?
I think what we offer more than a lot of other universities is personal development. I think it's easy to say, well, you could go to UT or A&M and get the same sort of thing you'd get at HBU. But I think the real value lies in how we develop these young people in very personal ways. We develop very personal relationships with these individuals. A&M, for example, has an enrollment of over 50,000. Great school, and I love my experience there, but you're a number there. Faculty don't have the time or sometimes the inclination to develop these personal relationships. So many of my students, I can see them develop as people, as professionals, as Christians. And there's nothing better, I think, in my day to see a student that you can see turn a corner, whether it be personal or spiritual or academic. Some of my students, when they're at graduation, we make eye contact, and I smile because I think, we got there, and I'm so thankful to see you receive that degree. And I think these personal interactions, this investment in your grandson or granddaughter or children as an individual, I think that's something that we offer here that often is neglected and is no longer part of the higher education field. And it's something, as an educator, I thrive on. That's the best part of my day, and I think my colleagues would echo that, is that we really develop people rather than just student ID numbers.
Dr. Joe, that was well said. And I'm sure your mom and dad are glad that you decided to move on. Nothing wrong with being a mechanic, but it's very clear you were destined for other things.
Thank you.
You can learn more about the college, COEBS. Give us that acronym stands for the college.
College of Education and Behavioral Sciences.
And so that is a very important college here at HBU, hbu.edu, COEBS. And remember 281-649-3211. You can call and ask admissions how you can enroll at HBU. Thank you so much, Dr. Joe. We're really excited about you being here. It's going to be exciting to see how God uses you here in the days ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you.